How's 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 weather is not good. Overcast. Maybe
Overcast skies.
rain. It rain.
hmm I heard there was a news story about the typhoon
Yeah,
that
yeah. Another
it,
typhoon is
yeah.
approaching.
Oh, there's another one approaching now.
Yes, yes. And it's stronger form of typhoon.
Really? I think the last one resulted in 17 deaths, I think.
Yeah, it was called typhoon 26th. The next is 27th.
Oh,
They
wow.
call typhoon only numbers.
Just the numbers, yeah. Interesting. So, are there going to be, are the people preparing for the
Yeah,
typhoon?
yeah. Now they are preparing, particularly that island
Uh-huh.
where had a big damage. Then now, they are thinking about evacuation.
Really? That's
Mm.
interesting. How long do you think it'll take them to evacuate everybody?
I'm not sure. At first, typhoon will come here, very close to my place.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
That's interesting. Um, are there, I guess I'm trying to figure out, are there usually this many typhoons in Japan every year, or are there many
Yeah, every
more
year.
this year,
Yes,
every
yes.
year?
Mm. Every year, uh, I give us some damage or flood or a landslide.
hmm But people don't usually die in these, right?
Yeah, that island, Ocean Island, it was had a big volcano. Then the soil was mixed by volcanic acid. Volcanic acid is not sticky, so it's easy to slide.
And as a result, I guess the water causes more floods
Yeah.
in those on that island.
Mm.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't know about this actually. For me, typhoons, like, I feel like the storms are maybe originating in southwestern, maybe in the Yellow Sea,
Mm.
maybe in the South China Sea, right? And then because the wind maybe moves them over Japan, that's how they travel.
Almost all cases, typhoons are born in the Philippines.
Oh,
So
okay.
I always say thank you, big gift,
Yeah,
my Filipino friend.
I'm sure they, I'm sure they feel bad, right? I mean, they had an earthquake recently. I think a few days ago they had an
Yeah, that's
earthquake.
right.
hmm
Brad too, that living in that place, Cebu.
Yeah, he told us. I know Brett lives there, but I didn't get a chance to ask him. His place was not was his place affected also, or was it close to his place that was more
Yes,
affected?
it's a very close place
Uh-huh.
is epicenter.
Wow.
So he was scared,
hmm
and after
Yeah.
that he had a lot of aftershocks. Mm.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, right? When we notice the natural disasters that are taking place. I mean, there seem to be a lot recently in the news. I mean, I know they happen, for scientific reasons and things like that, but when there's so many of them, especially in the same part of the world, you know, it makes us a little nervous about,
Yeah.
what the possibilities are or how we can prevent them, how we can prepare for them.
Mm.
It's not easy.
Very, very big earthquakes traveling around the Pacific Ocean, Japan and Korea or American some continent, Haiti or some country, and Australia, New Zealand, Philippines.
Yeah, they call it a ring of fire for the volcanoes.
Yes, yes.
So many parts, I guess, because of the tectonic plates, because of the structure of the Earth in under the Pacific Ocean, those plates, we have earthquakes that are common, and then we also have volcanoes, and we also have hurricanes, right? So seems to be a very active part of the world, geologically speaking.
But we don't hate volcanoes. Volcano gives us a lot of good things. Hot
Yeah,
spring.
springs, and also a volcano makes new land, right? If the volcanic ash
Yeah.
cools, then you can get new islands that way.
Mm. And in the future, volcano will be a good resource. Scientists are thinking about geothermal generator.
Yeah, geothermal energy, right?
Yeah,
Is it's Mount Fuji is a volcano, right?
yeah, dormant,
It's a
dormant.
dormant one. There are still a
Very.
lot of active ones all over Japan, I think, right?
There are many active volcanoes.
Hmm.
Mm.
And Mount Fuji, I think, is also the tallest mountain in Japan, right?
Yes, tallest, 3,600
Yeah,
kilometers, maybe.
something like that. Yeah, and it's very close to Tokyo, I think, right?
Yes, yes, a very beautiful mountain, independent mountain.
Yeah, it just kind of stands by itself, right?
Yeah.
That's great. It's beautiful. It seems like it's very nice, remarkably nice scenery. Like that area seems to be a very beautiful area. Lots of green land nearby, forests and things like that also. But
Whenever I see the Mount Fuji, I'm excited
does
from
it?
Shinkansen.
And
Yeah,
there's always snow at
Shinkansen.
the top, right?
Summer season, no snow, only a few months. Almost all of the year it had snow on the top, or
Hmm.
all covered by snow.
That's awesome. I'm very excited. Maybe one day, if I get a chance, I'll be able to visit Japan and
Yeah, yeah.
see the mountain from close up.
Yeah, if I take a Shinkansen from Osaka to Tokyo, I can find Fuji, Mount Fuji from the window. I'm very
Yeah,
excited. Wow.
it's nice. No, it does seem very nice.
Yeah.
What about, I'm thinking of other kind of historic places in Japan. I guess when it comes to the, I don't know if there's any other like geological mountains or things like that that are famous in Japan. I just know of the Mount Fuji, honestly. I
Mhm.
don't know of any other mountains really or any other islands. Or I mean islands, there's like a lot of islands in Japan, obviously,
Mm.
but I don't know if they're.
Tourist mountain is Mount Fuji 3,000, so not so high compared to
Mhm,
other countries.
mhm. Yeah, there are a lot of other countries that have much taller mountains, but I think Mount Fuji is unique because it stands by itself. It's very beautiful. It's close to some of the larger cities, like it's
Yeah.
close to Tokyo. It's close, and it's accessible. The people climb it often.
Yes, yes. Mm.
I think that's really cool. I like
Mm.
that idea. Maybe I can get it if I get a chance. I'll be able to climb it as well.
Yes, yes. You should
Nice.
come to Japan.
It'll be nice, I think, really. So, all right, Heidi. Let's see. So today we are actually going to be discussing adjectives. And what are adjectives, Heidi? I think you know. I'm going to let you see if you can answer this question.
Adjective is uh, modified the noun.
Exactly right. They're words that describe a noun. So we have many types of adjectives. There are two main formats that we use. Um, we can use adjectives to describe what something is. That's the first type. So if something is beautiful, if something is green, if something is red, whatever color descriptions, that's one way that we can use adjectives, right? Can describe what something is like, what something's characteristics are, right? And it can also be, um, we can also, they can also have a plural, or they don't have a plural or singular form, and they don't have masculine or feminine forms, right? And they can be placed at different parts of the sentence. So you can say, for example, the red book is on the table, right?
Yes.
You can also say the book is red, right? So there really isn't, some languages have a very specific order. Adjectives come before words or come after words. In the sense of English, if you are describing the noun without a verb, then
Mm.
you would have to put the adjective before the noun,
Much
right?
different from Italian or Spanish or Portuguese and French.
Exactly
And they
right
have
because yeah.
plural and female and male,
Uh-huh.
plural, singular. And almost case adjective came from after noun.
That's right, right? So for example, in Italian, la vita bella, like
Yeah, yeah. Bella.
the bella, I'm sorry, la
La
vita
vita
bella.
bella.
In Spanish, la vida bella, same
Yeah.
situation,
Mm.
the beautiful life, right? So
Yes, yes.
adjectives always come after
Mm.
the noun, but in English they can come before or after. If
Yeah,
there
yeah.
is a verb, then they would have to come.
Beautiful, beautiful house, like that.
Exactly, right? So, and yeah, they don't matter. The red house, the red homes, right? The red
Mm.
building, the red buildings. There's no change in number or gender. I mean, English doesn't really have gender in terms of nouns, but um, we can use them in many parts of the sentence to describe different nouns. Hey, Murad, how's it going?
Hello, hello. I am very fine, thank you. How are you?
Good, good, good. Good to see you again.
Same here, thank you.
Awesome. So, Murad, we're just talking about adjectives. What do adjectives do?
Well, adjectives are words that describe something like nouns or other adjectives, or
Exactly,
even
right?
adverbs.
Exactly. So adjectives describe stuff, right? They describe nouns. They modify nouns, and we don't really worry about singular or plural forms or masculine or feminine forms, and they can be placed at various parts of a sentence, right? So, what's an example of? Give us an example, Murad. Can you describe the room that you're in right now?
Sorry?
Can you describe to us the room that you're in right now? Maybe where you're sitting right now, using some
It's
adjectives.
a well-lit
Uh-huh.
room.
It's a well-lit room.
Yeah.
What
It's
else? What else about this room? Is it?
big.
It's big.
Yes. Pleasant.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's pleasant.
It's pleasant. It's
Good.
big. Uh-huh.
Yes.
Is it comfortable?
Yes. It's comfortable.
Nice. Nice. Um, are there chairs inside? Is it
No. There are two armchairs,
nice?
and it's, yes,
Seems
well
like a very
kept.
comfortable location. Yeah. For me, when I'm at home, I'm in a very comfortable situation. I got my table, my chair, well lit most of the time, my sofa. But here, when I'm traveling, I find any room. Um, I'm actually in a library right now. I have a study
Yes.
room. I have a study room that I reserved for the classes because I didn't want to teach any more classes in cars like I did earlier this week when I was traveling. So now there's a whiteboard behind me. It's a pretty well lit room. Eraser, but there's no marker. I was maybe going to use a marker for some of my classes, but there's no marker. So that's great. That's great, Murad. I think we understand the idea behind adjectives, but I wanted to use a little bit of get a little bit of practice. So the second part, I guess, I don't know why Heidi left, but maybe her connection was disconnected. But there's a difference between adjectives that end in ing and adjectives that end in ed, right? So when we use adjectives that end in ing, we are usually talking about a feeling, right? For example, something is exciting, amazing, fascinating, interesting, surprising, right? Uh, but when we use adjectives that end in ed, we are describing the person who is receiving this feeling, right? So I was excited to see my parents, right? So excited is describing the person, whereas the experience itself
It's exciting.
is exciting, right? Exactly. So the feeling or the experience itself is exciting, and the person that is receiving that feeling is excited or interested or surprised, right? Can you give us an example of a sentence like that, Murad?
Yeah. I was amazed at how beautiful she was.
I was amazed at how beautiful she was, right? Fantastic. And how could you use amazing in a different sentence?
She was extremely amazing.
She was extremely amazing. Or you could also say, it was amazing to see how beautiful she was,
Yes.
right? It was amazing to see how beautiful she was. I was amazed by her beauty, right? So those are both examples of this ed versus ing ending. And then last but not least, when we are using more than one adjective, there is an order to how we should be using them. And we typically don't use more than 3 adjectives in a sentence. I guess the sentences become too long and too unruly if we have that. But the order when we have a bunch of adjectives in a sentence is, we go with the opinion first, then if there's a dimension to the object that we're describing, age, shape, color, origin, material, right? So I could say something like, the round old um, uh, picture frame, the round old picture frame that is, well, actually, no, let me take that back. Round and old is good because I'm talking about the dimension or the, no, because dimension is different from shape, so I made a mistake there. So how about the old round black sofa? Something like that, right? So there is an order to this. Honestly, I don't know how exhaustive this list is. There could be more. There could be more types of characteristics that we can put into this order, but this is generally a good one that we can follow. A small car, a large house, of course. But if we have, um, dimensions, I guess, describe small, fat, big, things like that. Whereas shape would actually describe the shape of the object, square, oval, circle, something like that. Um, well, the example that they have here is an ugly old plastic box, which I think makes sense. An ugly old plastic box. Is there another type of sentence that you can think of, Murad, that uses 3 adjectives or less, and we would want to use this order?
Yes.
What would you?
20,
Oh, go ahead.
22-year-old Catholic nun.
The 22-year-old Catholic nun, right? Fantastic. So we have the age, and then we have, I guess, the origin in this case, so we're trying to describe the person. The 22-year-old Catholic nun, right? Speaking of Catholic nuns, there's actually an interesting story today about a nun in Washington, D.C., which is where I am right now, and she killed her baby, I think, because nuns are not supposed to have children. Something happened with a nun, and she killed her baby. It was a very disturbing story, but and she was very young. I think she was in her early 20s or something like that. Yeah. Anyway, didn't want to change the conversation, but a kind of distracting, kind of disturbing situation that we see here. Another example would maybe be, the flowing black wedding dress, or the flowing white wedding dress, excuse me. The flowing, so you're talking about maybe the dimension of the object, right? It's a flowing garment, right? The flowing white, and then wedding dress, I guess, would be a good way of talking about, the material that we're talking about. So that's the order that we look at when it comes to putting adjectives in a sentence. And the one thing so this last part is not really specific to adjectives, but it is something that we encounter when we are describing nouns. It is possible for nouns to describe other nouns as well, right? What's an example of that we see in English?
Something, for example, we always use, like credit cards.
Mm-hmm. Credit cards, right? So having credit is a noun, and card also is a noun, so credit cards, right?
English professor.
English professor, exactly, right? Many of the times, I actually like to think of situations in school, right? So subjects, right? So English professor, the person who teaches an English class, right? English class itself is also another example of a noun that's describing a noun. And another one would maybe be the sports car, right? It's a kind of car. It's a sports kind of car. Um, Lots of types of examples like that. So we do have some examples of nouns describing other nouns, but besides that, normally we have adjectives do the heavy lifting when it comes to describing other nouns and
Gold
describing
ring.
words. The gold ring, right? Yeah. The silver pendant, right? Whatever the case may be. The plastic bag, I think, is another way of thinking about it. Um, so any questions so far, Murad, on just
No.
the idea of adjectives or
Good.
adjectives? Okay, that's good. Um, let's then, I don't know where the others went. Well, I mean, Heidi, I think maybe she had to disconnect. I think we can go ahead and get started. The article that I chose is actually, I think, a little bit more appropriate for us because we have kind of the Muslim, background when it comes to teenage relationships. We come from that part of the world where it's not something that is as readily accepted as other societies. So I'm going to go ahead and open up this link, and it's actually funny because we tend to think of this as a Muslim thing. Here we are looking at it from an Asian perspective. So similar kind of traditional society, African Asian mentality. A lot of Indians, people from my part of the world, say that Chinese and Indians are very common in their kind of cultural outlook. I think when it comes to relationships, we can even extend that to include the Muslim populations of Africa and Asia. So um, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to screen share real quick so you guys can see. Let's see, screen share. Okay. So now you should be able to see what I'm talking about here. So BBC article related specifically to China. So China schools seek to nip young love in the bud. Right? In recent weeks, a number of Chinese secondary schools have introduced prescriptive new rules designed to discourage teenage romance. But this has been met with scorn and outrage on both social and official media, as the BBC's Dong Le reports. On the campus of a secondary school in China's famous silk city of Guangzhou, pupils of the opposite sex have been given a very important new instruction. They must maintain a minimum distance of half a meter from each other at all times. In addition, boys and girls are not allowed to go around school premises in pairs. Another school in the eastern city of Wenzhou, uh, Zhejiang province, has banned what it calls close interaction between students of the opposite sex, as well as students of the same sex. They do not define what close interaction really means. The school authorities in Wenzhou have threatened severe disciplinary action against offenders. Secondary schools admit students aged just 11. They are on the cusp of puberty and just the age when those notoriously raging hormones begin to wreak havoc. And with reports that teenage romance, although not necessarily sex, has become more popular on campuses, school authorities as well as parents are worried that children's academic performance is being affected. So some have moved to nip young love in the bud with stringent measures, and they will find support in some quarters. Immature love. The Chinese regard teenage romance as something undesirable, calling it zhao lian, which literally means early love, but in essence it denotes immature love. Schools and educational authorities are increasingly bombarding young people with information on the undesirable effects of zhao lian. There are entire websites dedicated to the issue of how to avoid the lure of the opposite sex and focus attention on study. Schools in China also run sex education courses. Both teachers and parents believe that young people in schools must not deviate from learning and must concentrate on studies to lay a good foundation for building a future. The schools in Guangzhou and Wenzhou are doing whatever it takes to achieve that, and some believe they should be praised for this. Absurd and illegal. But they have also been greeted by a torrent of angry posts from China's internet users after the rules were uploaded on Weibo microblogs. So I think Weibo is the Chinese version of a popular website. Many said that the rules were barbaric and oppressive. How do you keep measuring the pace between male and female pupils? One internet user asked. Mainstream media also added its voice. The state-run newspaper China Youth Daily called the measures absurd, ridiculous, and illegal. It is normal for young people to fall in love. Teenage romance in schools must be discouraged, but it is not advisable to use extreme and oppressive methods to do that, said the paper. And the BBC spoke to some young people who also weighed into the discussion. A high school graduate in Beijing said that schools had enacted rules banning students from being too intimate with each other, but it was up to teachers to decide how to implement them, and some teachers were quite flexible. One student from a high school in Shanghai admitted that campus romance had become a common phenomenon, and many students had fallen in love with each other. But, she added, it isn't a bad thing as some eventually get married after leaving school. There is nothing wrong with students finding love as long as it is not affecting their academic work, said another student from Beijing. Pure and innocent? Professor Zhang Yuling from Nanjing University, whose field of expertise is education, told the BBC that efforts backfired because the value of what was acceptable was changing in China. Schools treat pupils like prisoners, and people do not agree with that, he said. But Professor Zhang did agree that schools need to exercise more control over students. 30 or 40 years ago, before China embarked on reforms and opened up to the outside world, people were pure and innocent as far as sex was concerned, he said. But today's young people are exposed to more information and content than previous generations. People are particularly concerned over the availability to young people of pornography, Professor Zhang said. Whether or not more students join in this move to police the feelings and relationships of students, it is unlikely to become less of a talking point. But what many will watch out for is whether the regulations do discourage romances or end up encouraging forbidden love among students with a taste for breaking the rules. Right? So I think that article is phenomenal. I mean, I think it touches a lot of these interesting situations that we see throughout the world, but it argues, for both the positive, it argues both for the advantages and the disadvantages of something like forbidden or immature love, I should say. What's your opinion, Murad? Where do you stand on this issue?
I agree with what's done in China. I like that.
The idea of mandating a degree of separation between the genders?
Yes.
Why is that?
Because as we know, romance in school can affect academic achievements, especially for those who fall in love easily.
So you agreed with the approach by those first two cities that the focus of education, and especially the school environment, should be to educate the students and ensure that they are receiving an education and not getting distracted from that objective, right?
And I think school is for studying, and not for romance or relationships.
But do you think it's particularly harsh? Don't you think it's particularly harsh that?
It's not harsh.
I mean, how would these folks, for example, how would the school measure the meters distance between a girl and a boy? Right? It's saying, I think the first rule it was something like half a meter from each other at all times, right? That's the minimum distance.
Separated schools must be created or built.
So schools
for males and schools for females.
And then have that separated so that you have, so there's no way that the two genders can mix, right?
Yes.
Interesting. How is it in Morocco?
It depends on the area. You can find some schools which are not mixed.
Maybe in the traditional areas?
Yes.
But then in other cities, I would imagine in the larger cities, especially maybe the more elite high schools and things like that, that you would maybe have the mixed classes, right?
Yeah, I studied in a mixed high school.
And did you think you were distracted, or was it something that you were you disciplined enough to focus on your studies?
I was disciplined, really.
Uh-huh. Were all of your friends in the same category, or did some
And
of
I
them fall?
never, I never liked the so-called relationships in school, or
Uh-huh.
romance, or things like this.
Did you have friends
It's real.
who go
Mhm.
ahead, go ahead. I'm sorry, Murad, go ahead.
I just said it's really a waste of time
Uh-huh. I don't
to
know,
have a
honestly.
relationship while you are still a student. This really will affect your academic achievements.
Hmm. Yeah, I can definitely understand the value of maintaining a focus on your studies, right? Especially when you're a student. But I mean, let's say that you have a school that is mixed, right? So because that's the situation in China, I don't think they are going to separate the schools into male and female, especially because I think there are so many students in China. In the article, actually, one of the little boxes on the side is really interesting. The number of secondary schools in China is 81,662. There are over 94 million secondary school students, and 47% are female. So, pretty half and half distribution of males to females, and it's kind of one of these issues that I think makes it a very contentious issue in China. There are the fact sheer logistically, I don't think they can accommodate separate schools for males and females. So if we have the situation as it exists now, right, with the internet age and people doing all sorts of things, is there a way to separate the romance aspect from school so that maybe they can do it outside school, but then in school they're not allowed to do that?
Yeah,
What's the best way we could do that?
I think the best way to do that is education.
Uh-huh.
There must be a class specializing in just that, showing students the right path and not to make romance in school,
Hmm.
and that the school is for studying, not for relationships.
Okay.
Yes,
So definitely greater education, I think is a very good step, first step, right? So we have greater education. Maybe the students are maybe mandated to take this class, right? They have to take a class on relationship issues as well as romance and the school environment. But honestly, like I remember when I was in fifth grade. So this is still primary school, right? Fifth grade and sixth grade, we had classes that focused on sex education and relationships education. Honestly, it made the students more curious at some points of the class. It made the students even more curious into looking into the other gender, right? So we got the knowledge that we thought we would get. We were able to derive some benefit, but I'm not sure if it actually succeeded in keeping us away from the opposite gender. You know, I think it may have backfired, like we see what this one professor mentioned in this article. Um, do you still think it's worth doing?
yeah, but I still agree that the best way is to separate boys
To
from
separate the
girls.
genders? Uh-huh.
Yes,
Separate the genders from the very beginning. Okay, so that would be the best approach. But somewhere now, I guess the questions that I had were I'm trying to play devil's advocate to a certain degree, right? I'm not disagreeing. I'm just trying to make sure that we have the other aspect of this debate also covered. Um, these other folks in China, for example, the folks on Weibo, on all these websites, are saying that it's not fair for the schools to control people's personal lives. Is this something that you, what's your answer to that? Like, if someone were to come to you and say, it's not fair for the schools to dictate personal lives. The students, as long as they are doing their studies and they are, getting their work done and, performing well, the school should not have a right to say how they should live their personal lives. How do you agree, or how do you respond to this?
But the school, I think the school has the right to do that. Yes, for
Really?
example, parents,
Mm-hmm.
when something bad happens to a student, for example,
Mm-hmm.
his or her parents, I think most of the time blame the school. And they even ask the students, is this what you have learned in school? We always hear such phrases.
Mm-hmm. So the parents blame the school, but I
Yeah,
think I think by the same token, the schools sometimes blame the parents, right? Because the
but
school,
students,
yeah.
yeah, but I think students spend most of their time in school.
Mm-hmm. So the onus of responsibility should fall on the
Yeah,
school then. Okay. Yeah, it makes sense to me. Personally, I mean, I realize that I guess I like the approach that was mentioned in the article, that even though these rules are coming from higher authority, right, it was up to the teachers to decide how to implement them, and some teachers were quite flexible, because I think when you look at this case of a school, right, you're looking at a large population of students, right? Certain teachers, I think, know their students better than administrators or, people sitting in some government office in the middle of the capital city or something. So if the teachers are given the power, kind of like we see with parents, right? The parents know their kids more than most people. The teachers would also be able to know, okay, these children that I have in this class they misbehave more often than other children. As a result, I should be more strict with them compared to maybe kids in other classes who don't misbehave or get as easily, right? Could that be something that would maybe accommodate both sides and be a solution?
it could be.
It could be.
Yeah, especially if the professors or people who work in school do
Hmm.
their job as it must be.
Hmm. But do we also run the risk of establishing a double standard,
And
right?
I think everything also depends on the student perspective of life and their mentality, etc., etc.
So it is really, I think it boils down honestly to thinking about it from I think thinking about it from the point of view of the student is very beneficial, right? I mean, if you spend the majority of your time in school on a daily basis, and that's your only way of interacting with friends and people of the same age socially, I mean, how do you stop a teenager's curiosity? Like, curiosity about relationships, curiosity about romance, like we can say these things, we can teach them, we can separate them, we can do all of this stuff, but how can we combat that? Is it possible to combat that? I don't think it is. I think people will still be curious, right? They'll just have to suppress that curiosity because
Yes,
they go ahead, yeah, Murad, go ahead.
I agree with that. But till now, the best choice is separation.
Separation of
Really.
genders.
Yeah.
And I was actually curious to know about this, Murad. So you said that your high school was mixed, right? Did you
Yeah.
have did you have friends who fell into the trap of getting into romantic relationships, and were they did their academics suffer as a result of that?
Yes.
So you did see that.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Were there also people who had romantic relationships, but they were fine? They were able to successfully graduate?
No, no, no. Never.
Really?
Yeah. I think it's really very hard to cope with relationship and at the same time with your studies,
Why is that?
especially if you fall in love easily.
Uh-huh. So I guess then, what are the danger signs, Murad? What should young people know? Let's say you're teaching a class. Let's say you're teaching this relationships class, right? You mentioned early on that the relationship class is something that we can use to teach, young people. What would you mention as kind of the warning signs, things to look out for? Or how would you encourage people to believe, to follow your point of view?
I just can adopt the religious perspective.
Uh-huh. So like in this case, the Islamic perspective, right?
Yes.
Where so segregation of the genders is something that
Yes.
is mandated. Uh,
Any
yeah.
yes, any relation outside marriage is forbidden
Uh-huh.
and it's not accepted by God.
hmm
Yeah.
So I guess how do you implement that? Like, I mean, besides, I don't want to be going back to the same point, but even when we hear these kinds of conversations in Muslim societies, we see Muslims or people who receive these teachings beginning to get into relationships and doing everything possible without worrying about, definitely not worrying about religious consequences, but also not even worrying about their personal, obligations or things like that, right? Because they don't care. I mean, people just don't care, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I guess I'm asking. It doesn't seem like it's effective, Murad, right? We can only do so much, right? I think the rest is up to them.
Yes, it seems that they don't care
Yeah.
or they really do not understand what is
hmm
going on or
Yeah.
they are not aware of that.
They're not aware of the dangers of doing that, right? They think
Yes.
they can still cope. They think they can still have a social life, have a relationship, and also have the academic life. But they don't realize how difficult it is, right?
Yes.
Okay. I guess the one other thing I wanted to ask you, Murad, and this might be kind of a little bit related, but maybe related to maybe what your experience was, growing up in Morocco. But do you think the social pressures for Chinese students is actually one of the reasons behind why this has become such a big topic in that country? Do you think the social pressure is a big part of that? I should clarify, the social pressure to be a very successful student, is that part of the component of this discussion?
Absolutely. Yes.
hmm Why so do you think in China it's such a big deal? What makes China such a good example of why studies are crucial for success? Like when you
Because
think,
we know China.
go ahead,
Because we
Murad.
know China. We know China is a good country for inventions, for fabrication, for many things.
hmm they have a very hardworking
Yes, they are
population,
very
right?
hardworking.
Uh-huh. And also, I think the other aspect of it is it's a very competitive society, right?
Yes, that's right.
Because if we take a look at just the numbers, right, it's a dog-eat-dog society, right? I mean, sometimes we think of it like, it's a completely, whoever wins and can get on top, they are the ones that are going to land the best jobs, get into the best universities, have the best futures, right? Um, it's not a society in which you can be a passive learner and still be successful. Because,
Yes.
with hundreds of millions of people in your country, and limited mobility, limited social mobility, if you are not the top of your class, the top 0.1%, then your life will not be. You can't be as successful as if you were maybe in another country, right? Like India has a very similar situation. Maybe Morocco less so, but India as well. If you're not in the 0.1% of your class, the top 0.1%, then you're not going to get to the best universities. You're not going to be able to get into the best jobs. Things like that.
Yes, it's normal.
Is it similar in Morocco also, Murad? Is it very competitive in Morocco to get into the best universities and also the best jobs?
First of all, universities are free,
Uh-huh.
but getting the best grades is something very critical. You cannot get good grades unless you're a good student.
Hmm. And what's the process, Murad, if you don't mind describing it to me? Because I've never been able to learn about the Moroccan system. But for example, in the U.S., we have, you do your high school, and then midway through high school, 10th, 11th grade, you take this exam called the SAT that just kind of is important in indicating how successful you'll be in university, right, in college. So, but we don't have an exam that you have to pass to get into college. You know, some schools don't even require the SAT. Most schools require the SAT, but some schools don't, right? There's no like there's no magic test that you take that you have to pass. You have to be in the 0.1% to be able to go to university. Is it similar in Morocco, or is there a comprehensive exam for everybody that you have to pass?
Yeah, it's more or less.
It's more or less that system.
Yes. After all, you should complete 12 years of education before entering college.
Uh-huh.
We call it university in Morocco.
You guys call it University of Morocco, yeah. I know in the U.S.
Yeah.
we have the dual confusion of college and university, even though they're the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you have to pass an exam, some examination at the beginning of the year to see whether you're going to be accepted or not.
So this is before you enter the university, so the university entrance examination.
Yes. There are some branches or filière that do not require testing.
Uh-huh. So there are some branches that do not require testing. Sergio is saying Moroccan people are some of the best mathematicians. That's cool. I had no idea, honestly. That's awesome. So you guys have a good maths.
I think so too, yeah.
You guys have a good mathematics program then, or I guess a strong cultural impact, strong cultural emphasis on mathematicians. But anyway, Murad, I'm sorry. You were saying something about, so you have the entrance examination for university, and then,
Yeah.
yeah.
And some branches are really very hard to getting.
Maybe medicine, right? I think medicine is probably
Yeah.
one of those.
And maths, for example, science,
Medicine,
they
math,
are really
science.
hard. Yeah.
Hmm. What's considered an easy subject to study? Are there any easy subjects?
Like Arabic studies, Islamic studies, English, French literature,
Those are considered easier?
Spanish literature, or Hispanic or French. Yes,
Uh-huh. It's the
they are
same.
very easy to get.
It's the same. It's the same in my country. So in Bangladesh, we have a joke that the people who don't study Islamic history.
Yeah,
It's kind of funny actually because I think it's important in the sense that Islamic history is important as a subject, and it should not just take the back seat in terms of prestige. But that is what happens. The humanities generally does not get as much praise as, for example, the math and the science in those fields.
Yes, math and science are hard,
Yeah,
and only few students can
but
pursue
but
a
isn't it
career in that.
isn't it kind of unfair though, Murad? I mean, you studied linguistics, I studied history, right? It doesn't. Is that fair that these other subjects get more prestige? I think. I don't know.
Well, it depends on the student's abilities and skills,
Hmm.
and what the students really wants. You cannot pursue a career while you do not like it. I'm sure you're not going to succeed in it if you really do not want it.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, right? You won't be able to succeed in something unless you're passionate about it, unless you really enjoy it. And I mean, more power to the kid who loves to study Islamic history. I mean, if that's his if that's his favorite subject, then let him do that, right?
There is no favorite subject. I don't believe in favorite subject.
You don't believe in favorite
You
subjects? How
do
come?
what you really, yes,
Uh-huh.
everything is good.
Uh-huh.
Yes,
So we
science is good, literature is good.
students need a well-rounded exposure to all of these fields, right?
Yes,
Hmm. Very interesting. I don't know, I maybe the educational system all over the world is. Do you believe in testing students for comprehensive knowledge, or do you believe better that it's better to have students write about their learning? Because one of the biggest questions that I have seen in my particular experience has been multiple choice exam versus essay exams, right? Do you think there's a benefit in having, because some students are just really bad at multiple choice exams. It's not, some have argued that it's not the best method of testing somebody. Others say no, it's a very good method of testing somebody. What's your opinion on that, actually? I'm just curious.
my opinion is the following. I prefer
I do too.
essay exams. Yes,
Yeah.
when
I
you
hate I hate multiple
when you
choice.
examine a student on that,
Uh-huh.
they're going to show how able they are to produce sentences, ideas, concepts. Whereas
Absolutely.
in multiple choice, yes, they, I'm not sure, but they might just rely on their chances to
Yeah.
answer. For example, if you
Mm-hmm.
give them choices A, B, C, I'm not sure if they're going to answer based on their knowledge. Maybe they're just going to select something based on their on chance.
Mm-hmm. They could just
Do you
guess.
understand?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. They could just guess, and they could say, for example, I mean, I have taken more multiple choice exams in my life than I want to admit. You know, many of the exams that I've taken, I would be taking the exam and I would see A, B, C, D, E. Okay, so there's five choices, 20% probability that I fall on the right answer, right? If I don't know the
Yes.
answer, right? So oftentimes the way multiple choice exams are designed, two of the answers are very close. Two of the answers could be true, right? So you can eliminate three of them if there are five, and then you have two that are remaining. And it's a 50-50 chance at that point, right? Maybe it's A, maybe it's C. Um, it does test knowledge. I'm not going to say that it doesn't test knowledge, but I think an essay is better.
Yeah.
So I agree with you guys. Sergio as well. Sergio is also saying that he agrees with us. So yeah, Sergio, I don't know, man. Are you not in class right now, or you're just viewing the class? I think, right? We'll let him respond separately. But it's cool to see that you're a history teacher, Sergio. I think in an ideal world, I would become a history teacher, but in this country, there's very little pay, and it's an extremely long process to become a professor in academia, so it's not the best option for somebody, I guess. But who knows? I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do. So
And we must not despise any subject.
yeah, I agree with that. I mean,
Yeah,
there are going to be preferences. I prefer history over mathematics, for example, but I respect mathematics, right?
yes. Sometimes they are related. You cannot, for example, study English if you don't know history.
Hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, makes sense, right? What was your favorite subject in school, Murad? I'm just curious. This is just a conversation now, not nothing about teenage romance.
No, to be honest, I liked all the subjects.
Really?
Yes, I loved all the subjects I was taught.
Uh-huh. You didn't have one that you liked less than others?
No, no,
Wow,
I liked all the subjects.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
What about, so did you guys have to take exams in French, Arabic, and English? Or could you choose?
Which exam?
Like for example, if you guys had a like this college entrance examination like for the university, did you guys choose to take the exams in one language, or did you have to learn all three languages, like Arabic,
No,
French,
just in
English?
one language.
Just in one language, okay.
Yeah.
So some students maybe chose to take it in Arabic, others in French, others in English.
Yes. But English studies requires English.
Hmm.
Math requires French.
Math
Well,
requires French.
yes, science in
Uh-huh.
general requires French.
Interesting. Yeah, my background is only in English, Murad, unfortunately. Even my parents, because India was colonized by the British, um,
Yeah.
all the higher studies are in English. There's no French or other European language component. Um, but it's interesting in Mexico, or it's interesting in Morocco. I think maybe some of the most gifted students maybe go to Paris, maybe go to France for their higher studies also, right?
Yeah. And I recommend French for you. It's really a good language.
Really, it's
And
too difficult. It's too difficult.
it's not that difficult compared to some other languages like Russian or Chinese.
Yeah, Chinese is
And
difficult, I
did you
know.
know that French was the language of the UK before English?
Uh, Maybe, yeah, I think you're right because the English is a Germanic language, right? So
Yes.
it became something that established, I think, with the Norse invasions or maybe the Germanic invasion of England. Um,
Mm.
Before that, I think it was French, yeah.
High class people used to speak French,
Uh-huh.
while middle class people used to speak English.
That's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I know Persian. Persian is a very beautiful language. It's my favorite language. Um, and French is like the Persian of it's the language of romance in the Western world, and Persian is
Yeah.
the language of romance in the Eastern world. So uh, maybe there are some similarities that I can utilize to learn French, but no plans as of right now, Quran, unfortunately.
You already know Spanish or English and Spanish, and I
Uh-huh.
think it will be very easy for you.
We'll see. We'll
Yeah,
see. Awesome. Thank you, Murad, for a great class. I have one starting right now as well if you want to join.
the pleasure is mine. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Two more classes, 2 more hours if you want to join.
Yeah,
All right, Murad. Have a
thank
good
you
one.
so much.
I'll see
Have
you
a good
soon.
time. Thank you.
Take care. You too. Bye-bye.
How's 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 weather is no good. Overcast.
Uh-huh.
Maybe
Overcast, guys.
it rain. It rain.
Mm-hmm. I heard there was a news story about the typhoon
Yeah,
that
yeah. Another
it,
typhoon is
yeah.
approaching.
Oh, there's another one approaching now.
Yes, yes. And it's stronger form of typhoon.
Really? I think the last one resulted in 17 deaths, I think.
And yeah, it was called typhoon 26th. The next is 27th.
Oh,
It's
wow.
called typhoon only numbers.
Just the numbers, yeah. Interesting. So, are there going to be, are the people preparing for the typhoon?
Yeah, yeah. Now they're preparing, particularly that island
Uh-huh.
where had a big damage. Then now they are thinking about evacuation.
Really? That's
Mm.
interesting. How long do you think it'll take them to evacuate everybody?
I'm not sure. At first, typhoon will come here, very close to my place.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
That's interesting. Um, are there, I guess I'm trying to figure out, are there usually this many typhoons in Japan every year, or are there many
Yeah, every
more
year.
this year,
Yes,
every
yes.
year?
Mm. Every year uh, I give us some damage or flood or a landslide.
Hmm. But people don't usually die in these, right?
Yeah, that island, Ocean Island.
For scientific reasons and things like that. But when there's so many of them, especially in the same part of the world, you know, it makes us a little nervous about,
Yeah.
what the possibilities are or how we can prevent them, how we can prepare for them.
Mm.
It's not easy.
Very big earthquakes traveling around the Pacific Ocean, Japan and Korea or American some continent, Haiti or some country, and Australia, New Zealand, Philippines.
Yeah, they call it a ring of fire for the volcanoes.
Yes, yes.
So many parts, I guess, because of the tectonic plates, because of the structure of the Earth in under the Pacific Ocean, those plates, we have earthquakes that are common, and then we also have volcanoes, and we also have hurricanes, right? So seems to be a very active part of the world, geologically speaking.
But we don't hate a volcano. Volcano gives us a lot of good things. Hot
Yeah,
springs.
springs, and also a volcano makes new land, right? If the volcanic ash
Yeah.
cools, then you can get new islands that way.
Mm. And in the future, volcano will be a good resource. Scientists are thinking about geothermal generator.
Yeah, geothermal energy, right?
Yeah,
Is it's Mount Fuji is a volcano, right?
yeah, dormant,
It's a
dormant.
dormant one. There are still a
Very.
lot of active ones all over Japan, I think, right?
There are many active volcanoes.
Hmm.
Mm.
And Mount Fuji, I think, is also the tallest mountain.
It was had a big volcano. Then the soil was mixed by volcanic acid. Volcanic acid is not sticky, so it's easy to slide.
And as a result, I guess the water causes more floods
Yeah.
in those on that island.
Mm.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't know about this actually. For me, typhoons, like, I feel like the storms are maybe originating in southwestern, maybe in the Yellow Sea,
Mm.
maybe in the South China Sea, right? And then because the wind maybe moves them over Japan, that's how they travel.
Almost all cases, typhoons are born in the Philippines.
Oh,
So
okay.
I always said, thank you, big gift,
Yeah,
my Filipino friend.
I'm sure they, I'm sure they feel bad, right? I mean, they had an earthquake recently. I think a few days ago they had an
Yeah, that's
earthquake.
right.
Hmm.
Brother too, that living in that place, Cebu.
Yeah, he told us. I know Brett lives there, but I didn't get a chance to ask him. His place was not was his place affected also, or was it close to his place that was more
Yes,
affected?
it's a very close place
Uh-huh.
is epicenter.
Wow.
So he was scared,
Hmm.
and after
Yeah.
that he had a lot of aftershocks. Mm.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, right? When we notice the natural disasters that are taking place. I mean, there seem to be a lot recently in the news. I mean, I know they happen, in Japan, right?
Yes, tourist 3,600
Yeah,
kilometers maybe.
something like that. Yeah, and it's very close to Tokyo, I think, right?
Yes, yes, a very beautiful mountain, independent mountain.
Yeah, it just kind of stands by itself, right? That's
Yeah.
great. It's beautiful. It seems like it's very nice, remarkably nice scenery. Like that area seems to be a very beautiful area. Lots of green land nearby, forests and things like that also. But
Whenever I see the Mount Fuji, I'm excited
does
from
it?
Shinkansen.
And
Yeah,
there's always snow at
Shinkansen.
the top, right?
Summer season no snow, only few months. Almost all of the year it had snow on the top, or
Hmm.
all covered by snow.
That's awesome. I'm very excited. Maybe one day, if I get a chance, I'll be able to visit Japan and
Yeah, yeah.
see the mountain from close up.
Yeah, if I take Shinkansen from Osaka to Tokyo, I can find Mount Fuji from the window. I'm very
Yeah,
excited. Wow.
it's nice. No, it does seem very nice.
Yeah.
What about? I'm thinking of other kind of historic places in Japan. I guess when it comes to the I don't know if there's any other like geological mountains or things like that that are famous in Japan. I just know of the Mount Fuji. Honestly, I don't
Mhm.
know of any other mountains really or any other islands. Or I mean, islands. There's like a lot of islands in Japan, obviously,
Mm.
but I don't know if they're.
Tourist mountain is Mount Fuji 3,000, so not so high compared to
Hmm.
other countries.
Hmm. Yeah, there are a lot of other countries that have much taller mountains, but I think Mount Fuji is unique because it stands by itself. It's very beautiful. It's close to some of the larger cities, like it's
Yeah.
close to Tokyo. It's close, and it's accessible. The people climb it often.
Yes, yes. Mm.
I think that's really cool. I like
Mm.
that idea. Maybe I can get it if I get a chance. I'll be able to climb it as well.
Yes, yes. You should
Nice.
come to Japan.
It'll be nice, I think, really. So, all right, Heidi. Let's see. So today. We are actually going to be discussing adjectives. And what are adjectives, Heidi? I think you know. I'm going to let you see if you can answer this question.
Adjective is uh, modified the noun.
Exactly right. They're words that describe a noun. So we have many types of adjectives. There are two main formats that we use. Um, we can use adjectives to describe what something is. That's the first type. So if something is beautiful, if something is green, if something is red, whatever color descriptions, that's one way that we can use adjectives, right? Can describe what something is like, what something's characteristics are, right? And it can also be, um, they can also have a plural or they don't have a plural or singular form and they don't have masculine or feminine forms.